podcast studio, Graham Brown and Clement Hochart. Welcome.
Nice to meet you.
It's lovely to have you here because I know we're talking about technology, but we're talking about something which in many ways isn't related to technology. We're going to talk about food and wine, of course, and who better to talk to food and wine about than with our resident French expert. So Clement, thank you so much for coming today. I'm really looking forward to this. The founder, managing director of Epicurio.
Exactly.
How would you describe Epicurio to the listeners and viewers? What exactly is it?
So Epicurio is a specialized marketplace for wine and spirits. So we are based in Asia. We try to bring as many as possible solutions for wine lovers and whiskey drinkers to get many different tastes, to make sure they can find what they really like about wine. So we don't specialize in French wine. We have really a wide range of many different wine from different countries in the world. What I found very interesting in Singapore is that you have really a nice representation of the wine world in Singapore, and that's why we started Epicurio with this aspect of really showcasing every wines. In
So, well, global wines showcased here. Is it for the Singaporean market or is it for the Asian market? Who are you focused on?
So we focused on Singapore, Hong Kong, and Malaysian markets.
Singapore, Hong Kong, Malaysia.
Yeah.
Okay, that's interesting. So I'm going to find out a little bit more about why you focus on these markets as well and what you're doing as well. Let's talk about wine first. So how did you get into wine? Were you trained in wine? Were you a sommelier? Were you just somebody who loved wine? What was your relationship with wine before you started Epicurio?
So I was really passionate about wine. I started a small cellar at home when I was quite young, maybe before 80s.
Before you're 18?
Yeah, before.
A cellar?
Yeah, a small cellar. So when you start a cellar, you start with few bottles and then step by step.
Just as a hobby, like in France? Or?
I mean, I liked it. And so when my dad was ordering some wine, I was tasting it some with them and ordering some for me. And then, I just loved wine and realized that it's kind of an incredible industry and product for many different reasons. The one which is the most important for me is we can't control everything about wine, so there is many different aspects that doesn't matter the technique, doesn't matter the effort we put in the wine. It's also based on the soil, based on the climate, and we can't control everything in this product. So I was really curious about how we can discover more and more about wine, and we never stop learning in wine, I think.
Right. We'll talk a bit about the wine market itself in Asia as well, because that's a fascinating story, isn't it? What is if you were back in France now? You're from France originally. If you were back there, is the market healthy for wine? Is it a growing market? Because it's obviously a very old and established market in France. What are people like yourself in France doing? Are they looking abroad for opportunities, or are they trying to grow the market through different types of products? Or where are the trends back in Europe?
So I think that back in Europe is quite established. It's more like it's not growing. It's more like quite stable. And people are more maybe trying to go more direct. So the trends are consumers want to know a bit more about the product, what is behind, who are the people behind the winemakers, and that's why we can see many platform or website and platform to connect more the consumers with the winemakers.
Right.
And back in maybe 10, 20 years ago, many consumer was actually buying from supermarket, because supermarkets in Europe have also a wider range than in Singapore or in Asia. So I think
so I mean, Europe has a very sort of established, or had an established distribution channel, didn't it? And it had an established way of doing wine, and there was a lot of tradition there as well. So you come to a place like Asia where it doesn't have anything, if you like, in many ways. So you're starting from zero. Did it make it easier to do what you were doing in Asia? The fact that there wasn't really any kind of established channels here for wine. Like you talk about supermarkets, if you go to like a Carrefour or something like that, these are probably the biggest sellers of wine in Europe, if not the world, right? Yeah. Come to Asia, what do you have as an equivalent? Is there any sort of like established channels like that, or have you really got to just start from zero?
So yeah, you're right. So it's maybe less established, is more fragmented because supermarket doesn't have the range of wine that they have in Europe. And this was what interests me, in a sense that creating a marketplace is really solving the problem of consumer supply, so and consumers access to wine, not by getting like a contact list of 20 different importers and required to call them and ask what is the stock level, do you have this kind in stock, this kind of wine, I'm looking for this label, and then end up spending an afternoon to just shop for wine. So the marketplace solution was the perfect solution for consumers in Asia, in a sense of this fragmented market.
Great, excellent. Well, let's talk a little bit about wine. Let's have a look at, if we can just flash up the Epicurio website and have a look at what's on offer here, just as an example. Maybe you can let's have a look at some of the selection that you have here. So these are wines from all over the world that you have here. So if I was to choose a personal favorite, I'm red. Has to be. I'm very traditional Cabernet Sauvignon. Like, what's the situation like for Cabernet Sauvignon? What would you recommend as an example? What would be a favorite of yours?
So for Cabernet Sauvignon, there is always the traditional, I would say, Bordeaux blend with Cabernet Sauvignon, Cabernet Franc, and Merlot. I think it's quite interesting in maybe south of France is that you will have more and more guys maybe in Languedoc or in the Mediterranean area who will produce Cabernet Sauvignon 100%. So which is really nice also to have not a blend but a single grape.
Is that quite rare? Because I mean, I'm not a wine expert. Are most grapes blends these days, or how is that?
So it was quite rare in France, but it's very common, for example, in US. Cabernet Sauvignon will be very popular in California and in Australia. And I think, if you like Cabernet Sauvignon, you will really enjoy Californian wine, I think. And I think probably in South America, they start to also use more like international grape like Cabernet Sauvignon, and because they are very used to do like 100% Mourvèdre or Tempranillo, so they will do also Cabernet Sauvignon 100%, and this will be like really full body structured wines that probably that
I enjoy it. I like that strong taste. No messing around. What about yourself? Personal favorite?
So I really like Pinot Noir, and I also grew up in Loire Valley. So I like some of the Cabernet Franc there, 100%.
Great.
And I'm moving more towards white wine now.
All right.
So I really enjoy.
What do you recommend? I like obviously most wines, but white wine I find too acidic. So is there sort of a less acidic wine that you recommend that's white?
So I really like the Sauvignon Blanc, like Pouilly Fumé in South Loire Valley. Those will be some of my
great choices, especially in this heat as well. That's sort of what you want on a hot day like this, exactly. Right? So there used to be a joke, and I guess let's share this between English and French, right? And we'll talk about wine, right? So the joke's going to be on me, right? As being from England, there used to be a joke, and I'm sort of taking this to Asia in the context of that many years ago, England didn't have a wine growing culture really, and so we imported all our wines from France and from Germany, the white wines from Germany originally, and some from Italy and later on Spain, and then the New World sort of in the 80s, 90s, and so on. But English tourists used to go to France, and in the days where they would get the ferry or the train, there wouldn't be the train back then, but the ferry to France and go to the Carrefour or the supermarket, the hypermarché, they would go stack up all the wines, and they would specifically put out wine for English tourists, and they would put out the very cheapest white wines, like I don't even know if French people drink it, but like the Piador, these sort of very cheap, not great wines, which are aimed at English people who didn't know what to drink and thought, oh, that looks French, I'll drink that, I'll buy that. So that was the joke, that these are pour les Anglais, for the English, these wines, right? They were quite uneducated in wine. You have to understand and learn about wine, and it takes time and so on. Where are we in Asia when it comes to wine and appreciation? Do people understand wine? Is there a bit of snobbery still? Is it a bit, how is it for the average Asian consumer in wine?
Yeah, so I think it's quite fun to see this this story, but for Asia, it's and I think in the world maybe people are always shy about wine, and it's not always about knowledge and who knows about wine, but it's more about taking the step of saying, okay, maybe I will try. I will just share what I feel and what I tasted, and maybe it's wrong, maybe it's right. We have our own taste anyway, so probably because sommelier always speak with very big words and maybe sometimes weird word, and that makes the consumer quite shy about wine, saying, oh, okay, I'm not supposed to speak
There's a bit
about
of
wine. Yeah,
positioning.
But I think that new world wines have also bring another culture to wines, with more like comments on grapes and whether it's blend. So more kind of a simple approach to wine that helps a lot the consumer in Asia. And we see a lot of Asian consumer, they know what is a grape, they know what grapes they like. They sometimes know what are the style they like. They might not know what is Sancerre, what is Clos Vougeot and everything, but they know at least what they like, and they are sometimes more able to describe their taste compared to French people that will just use appellation words, small villages that are typical, that usually represent a taste, but more in terms of appellation, history.
Yeah, exactly. But the Asian consumers are more direct and maybe talking about the tastes. And
exactly. Yeah.
That's really interesting. So we have to talk about the Asian consumers, and then I want to talk about, I mean, you mentioned sommelier as well. So there's an interesting story we're going to talk about there. Asian consumers, we're in a very interesting time. If we look at the data, in 2009, there were 700 million middle-class Asians, and by 2030 that's predicted to grow to 3.5 billion. So what's happened is you've got this 5 times expansion of the Asian middle classes in 21 years, which is phenomenal growth. You're at 2 billion, like 1.5 billion extra middle class people. And I guess wine is going to be one of those products, one of those goods that they're going to consume, right? So maybe we can have a look at some of the data. We can flash that up. This is data from Wine Vault, as an example, which is, I guess, an industry or trade publication. What does it say there? That Singapore is slated to become, Singapore is supposed to become the new Asian wine hub. What do you think about that? Do you see that? I mean, Singapore's a tiny market. It's a very small market, 5 million people. Yeah. Do you see it becoming a wine hub, in a wine center in Asia? Is that too grand? Is that too big an expectation? What do you think?
So I think that also on the aspect that Wine Vault is a storage company for wine. So I think for sure Singapore will become a wine hub, but more on the logistics side and on the showcase part of big brands and showcasing wine for other markets. So we see Malaysian importers, Thai importers, Indonesian importers that also travel to Singapore and see what are the markets in Singapore and try to also not replicate, but get inspired from all the brands that are present already in Singapore, and then we'll maybe get in touch with them and try to get those brands as well in their countries.
Okay, interesting. So as a logistics hub,
and as a showcase,
as a showcase as well, especially trade shows and that sort of like retail base as well, that whole sort of supply chain built around Singapore. Let's talk about the consumer side. So there's some data here about China. We can't talk about wine without talking about the magnetic impact of China on that market and on the whole of Asia, really. It says here, I don't know where the source for this one was, but it says by 2021, China will replace the UK as the number 2 on global wine market list. I guess that means wine consumption, or I don't know what wine market list means, but obviously China's becoming more important, maybe second only to the US at the moment. How's that affecting the world? Because China in many ways is like a black hole. It's like bending the whole sort of space of any industry, entertainment, sports. How is that affecting wine globally? Are you feeling the pull of China?
So I think it's for sure affecting. It has increased a lot the prices of many Bordeaux Grand Cru and some of the top wines. Some wineries are also trying to get a specific strategy to for the China market. For example, Penfold is very strong there and start to be more like direct to consumer there, to create clubs, capture more of the market and really position their brand on this market. So for sure it has a big influence. For other markets, for sure the price increase of fine wines is huge. Probably most of the French fine wines are not consumed in France anymore.
China.
But
how has it affected the pricing? Just give us, I mean, obviously I've ambushed you, but just an example, how has that affected the price of these Grand Crus?
I think in maybe 10 years, it probably have increased by 4 times or maybe more. Yeah,
globally.
I mean, globally as
a result of demand from China.
Yeah.
Wow. But the cost has remained the same, right, to produce these things?
Yeah, maybe it has increased a bit, but yeah, should be quite
right. So if you're producing Grand Cru, you're laughing, right? You're doing very well at the Chinese market.
Yeah.
So are the sort of traditional wineries cracking the Chinese market I mean, we've seen this interesting trend with luxury goods in China, and obviously, like Louis Vuitton, Moet Hennessy, like that group has done very well. But at the same time, that there'd be many brands that haven't done well in China because maybe they've sort of come in thinking, oh, well, we are a luxury brand, we don't have to do it this way. How is it sort of working in Asia generally with these traditional strong players maybe that have a good presence in Europe? Do they get Asia? Are they doing well in Asia? Are they finding it difficult to break into these markets?
So I think it's for sure difficult to break the Chinese market. And I think one of the particularities is that Chinese consumer can adopt a product and a brand very quickly. So everyone get excited about it, but they can also forget a brand very quickly.
Right. Because the history means nothing as well. Like you talk about all the appellation and stuff, it means nothing to them.
Yeah. So that impact a lot. Many brands that thought they capture the market, they start growing very fast and then disappear. and it happens to certain wine importers, and we can see also in terms of Bordeaux or fine wines, there is fine wines that doesn't work in China, and there is fine wines that work very well in China.
Really?
And sometimes for small details. Yeah. So. Yeah.
Yeah, why would that be? Is it taste or?
Or it could be the taste, or could be the name. So, for example, but also taste in a sense of so taste or tradition. For example, they don't drink so much sweet white wine. So then the Sauterne is kind of been forgotten on the Bordeaux space.
Yeah.
And we can directly see it on the pricing. Their price have not increased so much compared to others.
Yeah. Interesting. So if you go back maybe 10 years ago, when the Asian middle class started emerging outside of Japan and Korea and so on, and go back to China as an example, there were many stories. I don't know how true they were. Like if you went to Shanghai, if you were young and hip and trendy and rich in Shanghai, you would buy red wine and you would mix it with Coke. So are these sort of, when you hear stories like that, how do you feel? Do you feel that, as a wine distributor and platform, we have to change the way people consume it? Or do you just think that's an introduction to wine, and that will change over time?
Well, it's for sure an introduction to wine. It's also maybe the young generation that are doing this because they are more into cocktails. Yeah. I think we should not forget that we have also the sangria in Europe.
Fair enough.
And what has been maybe the discussion is, and the surprise is because they were using maybe fine wines to do this when we know it's not supposed to be done. But I guess it can be a nice sangria with some fine wines.
An expensive sangria, right?
An expensive wine.
So, I mean, on that note, I want to talk about sommeliers. So you've mentioned sommelier already. For those that don't understand what a sommelier is, what is it? Can you describe what a sommelier is, and how long does it take to become one?
So a sommelier is someone who has a strong experience tasting wines, pairing wines with different meals, different foods,
right.
And who understand very well the different palates of the consumers, to be able to quickly understand what are probably the preferences and I would say the taste pattern of a consumer, and being able to straight away advise him on certain wines. I guess, and it requires experiences on wine, because you need to have really good knowledge on exactly what people can look for in a Sauvignon Blanc, or right. in different variation of Sauvignon Blanc and everything. So,
is it knowledge? Is it art? Is it a science? Is it stuff you can learn, or is there a bit of a human touch which you can't teach? What do you?
I think you can learn. There will be always people better at it than others, because it's experiencing one thing, approach it's another one. You need to also listen a lot the consumers. So if you just feel that you are a sommelier and you know everything and that's it, then you will probably not evolve a lot with the trends and with the consumers. So,
Okay, so where are we going with this is that I want to ask you, something that you're doing in Epicurio is building a sommelier chatbot. Okay, is that possible? I'm sure sommeliers in the world must be thinking, what the hell's going on here? You can't make a chatbot sommelier. You can't put these two worlds together. Okay, before we turn into the world of flames and criticism, what exactly is a sommelier chatbot?
So sommelier chatbot is an advisor for wine, who is able to, instead of listening and understanding the consumers, he will look at the history, the pattern, the social profile, using the data from Facebook, from internet, the personal data, and then the sommelier as an advisor. So we used a lot of experiences from real sommelier, expert from this industry, who enter in our system different, I would say, different rules, from taste to type of wine, taste to type of food to type of style and region. So it's kind of really taking the whole chain of the food pairing or the selection of wine and really splitting it into many parts to make it as simple as possible and to make it as much automated as possible.
Is it just pattern, like matching one pattern with another pattern? Is that what it is at the end of the day?
Yeah, it's I would say it's this, but it's maybe splitting the patterns in many different parts, so that we can have different pattern with similarity and different ones with. So it's really getting some individual parts and making sure we can 100% match them with a type of wine, but it's definitely a pattern matching with a pattern of taste, matching with a pattern of style and region and grape of wine.
Right. So how does that work? Does that work so as a consumer, or maybe you're a hotel chain manager, who does the sommelier work for? Does it work for me instead of my phone? Or tell us a little bit about how this actually comes about.
So it's really for the consumers. Then it can be for the consumers online. So then it's mostly on Facebook, directly on the website, or even within an app. The consumer can start engaging the discussion. So different feature that we have is it can directly start by requesting some idea about what it could purchase, or saying, okay, I like red wine, and then the sommelier will continue and ask him different questions to kind of narrow down the selection. And understand more the pattern of this consumer.
Right.
On another side, it could be just taking a picture of the meal that you're having, and then the sommelier will detect what kind of food is it, and suggest wine directly based on the picture.
That's pretty cool.
So this is quite funny and quite nice to have.
Yeah.
And we wanted to have also some educational content inside. So by matching the food with wine, the sommelier will also explain the consumer why actually pick those wines for this food, so that the consumers can also, so then Sauvignon Blanc goes well with some seafood style meal. And that's why he matched those wine for this food.
Okay.
So,
Good. So you are focusing right now on Hong Kong, Malaysia, and Singapore, right?
Yeah.
Is it easier to get those consumers to use a chatbot sommelier than it would be, say, for example, in France? Would there be any differences?
I think yes, in a sense of also the Asian consumers are known to be more interested in new products and new services. The same way that they can adopt a brand, they can adopt a service, they can adopt technology faster than other maybe consumers. They can reject and they can forget, but they can adopt faster. So as soon as they adapt faster and they stick to it because it's useful, then I think it has a good potential in Asia. But for the chatbot sommelier, we have developed this technology as a SaaS model, so we can actually deploy it in US, in Europe, in Asia, wherever it's needed. And I think maybe the US market is quite already using different chatbot, and I think maybe more mature about this. Maybe slower, but adopting slower, but already.
Yeah, that's your number one market in the world for wine as well.
Yeah,
so,
also.
And do you have any pushback from traditional sommeliers who are like, come on, I'm not going to do a French accent, but 15 years learning. I don't know how long these guys learn, that sommelier learns, but many, many years learning to be a sommelier. It's art, it's a craft, it's a lifelong commitment. And then you are putting this in a chatbot. Do people look at what you're doing and say, come on, this can't work? You can't take a photo and match it here. There's so many other factors. How do you deal with that? Do you get much of that?
Not. I mean, we don't get so much of that. I think we will not replace the sommelier. It's more we will equip restaurants and hotels who don't have the capacity to spend and to hire a sommelier full time. Then we will equip those restaurants and hotels with a digital sommelier.
So let's talk about that in the context of Asia, because we just talked about this expanding middle class. An extra 2.5 million middle class people buying wine, and these hotels are catering for travel market in Asia is growing very fast. So more Asians are traveling within Asia as well, and they're spending a lot more money and they're buying more wine. So how do the hotels fit in here with your chatbot sommelier? What's the plan? How are you going to help these hotels? Because I imagine they're thinking, well, all these new consumers are coming, these new guests are coming, and they're not asking for red wine and Coke. Maybe they're asking for something a little bit higher level or something more specific to their meal. What do you do when you see that sort of market? What's your plan?
I think the chatbot sommelier can enable those hotels and restaurants to start more concept of wine bar, having more SKUs available in their wine inventory, and I mean, I think they are not waiting for the chatbot sommelier to be there to start this kind of trends. We can clearly see that this middle class is looking for wine, but also for wine as a social drinking activity more than just the fine wine and all the very, I mean, geeky part of wine. I think it's really onto will definitely drive more growth, this middle class, but through boutique wines, social drinking, and I think the chatbot is there to also make the wine culture more popular and more easy. People can challenge the sommelier and can try to be their own sommelier step by step, learning from the content there. We will never replace the sommelier. I think that in maybe 5-star hotels, we expect the service to be a real sommelier with his own culture, his own character, his own taste and his own recommendation. We want to feel the authenticity of it. In some regular hotels and restaurants, we are happy to have like a very efficient, quick service because we are with friends and we will not speak about wine the whole dinner. So
yeah, interesting. Okay, good. And talk a little bit about Epicurio itself, the company. How many people are you now?
So we are 4 people full time, and then we have also some part time and freelancers, but we are 4 full time.
Based here in Singapore?
Yeah, based in Singapore.
Right. Okay. And your plans to grow? Obviously, I know you mentioned off air about your plans to target 250 hotels.
Yes.
Right. Okay. So that means, is that possible with 4 people? Are you growing your team? What's the plans?
So the main advantage of this technology is as it's a SaaS model, it's very easy to replicate. the heart of the technology is used in all the hotels. It's the same kind of same brain to use in different customized way for each hotel. But the team doesn't need to grow as much as we could think.
Yeah. So I mean, you could do it with 4 people. You could add some extra people, but you don't need to get a huge development team to make this happen, right?
No, most of it is already developed, and it's 4 to 6 people maximum.
Yeah. I'm just wondering if there were people listening or watching this who are passionate about food and wine like you, that, you know, they hear what you're doing, love what you're doing, and want to connect with you. What kind of people would you like to hear from? Obviously, as you say, you haven't got a burning need to recruit lots of people, but there may be people who can help you in different markets. What kind of people do you want to have conversations with?
So I'm really happy to discuss with people in other countries to see how we can expand with their help, and yes, we are definitely looking for partners to grow faster globally. So
what kind of partners? Would it be retailers or technical people or people from a wine trade, or
will be more retailers or importers, maybe other hotel family groups or this kind of thing.
Excellent. Good. Well, thank you for coming onto the show today and sharing your journey with us. And you know what? We didn't talk about how you got to Asia in the first place. We talked so much about wine and, you know, the growing Asian middle class. And there was that whole story about how you got here in the first place, because you didn't just come straight to Singapore. But maybe we have to do a a follow-up, the story about how you got here in the first place. But Clement, thank you so much for coming on today and sharing your journey. How do people get in touch with you? So if I was an importer or I was in hospitality and I wanted to get in contact with you or the Epicurio team, what's the best way?
So the best way is to just drop me an email on Clement at epicurio.co. Yeah.
Excellent. Good. We'll put all the details in the show notes. Clement, or Clement, as you say, Hochart.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. Merci bien. Thank you for coming on the show today. It's been great to have you here. And if you are watching on YouTube, then please subscribe to our YouTube channel and go and check out Clement and his team at Epicurio. And if you love wine, go and check it out. You've got some fantastic selections there.
Yeah.
Merci beaucoup.
Merci beaucoup, Graham. Thank you.
Excellent.
Cool.
Very good.